Okay, so I want to start with a question that on the surface just feels wrong. Can the thing that gives us our greatest joy also be the source of our deepest sorrow? We're all taught that love is the ultimate good, right? But there's this ancient Buddhist text that frames it as a paradox, and it sparked a debate that went from a grieving father all the way to a king's palace.
And it all starts right here, with this absolutely raw, heartbreaking statement. This isn't some abstract philosophy. This is the real, human voice of a man whose entire world has just been shattered. His pain? Well, that's our way into this whole profound discussion.
So the story kicks off with a Brahmin, a man of high standing, who is just completely consumed by the death of his only son. He can't function. He spends his days at his son's grave, just weeping. And in his total desperation, he seeks out the one person he thinks might have an answer, the Buddha.
And it's really important to get this. This isn't just some folk tale or a made-up story. This whole thing comes directly from a sutra, a sacred text. So what we're doing is essentially listening in on a 2,000-year-old conversation about the very nature of human emotion.
Okay, so the grieving father finds the Buddha and just pours his heart out, explaining that his deep love for his son is the very reason for his endless pain. He's looking for comfort, for some kind of solace. But what the Buddha says next, honestly, at first it sounds incredibly harsh.
The father's view is simple, and it's something we all get. From love comes joy. It's common sense. But the Buddha's response is just stunning. He directly counters him, basically saying, "You're right. Your sorrow is born from your love. From what is dear to us, that is where grief comes from."
The Brahmin is just floored. He actually argues back, insisting that, no, love can only bring happiness. He just can't accept this, and let's be real, who could blame him? It goes against everything we feel in our gut to be true. So he walks away, totally unconvinced and probably more confused than when he started.
But the story doesn't end there. Not even close. This shocking idea doesn't just stay a private conversation. The Brahmin, still really upset, starts telling people what the Buddha said. And this idea, well, it starts to spread.
You can almost see the ripple effect happening in real time. The Brahmin complains to some jesters, and of course, they take his side. Then they tell other people. The story travels from person to person like some kind of wild gossip, until it finally makes its way through the city gates and right into the royal court.
So King Pasenadi hears this teaching, and just like the Brahmin, he's super skeptical. It sounds like complete nonsense. But he's a wise ruler, so he doesn't just dismiss it out of hand. Instead, he sends a royal messenger to go straight to the source and ask point blank, "Did you really say that love is the root of sorrow?" The messenger gets there and asks the king's question, and the Buddha's response here is just brilliant. He doesn't give some complex philosophical lecture. Nope. Instead, he tells stories, powerful, tragic little parables that are designed to make his point in the most human way possible. He just lays out a series of these devastating examples. He talks about people who loved their family members so intensely that when they died, the survivor was literally driven to madness, left wandering naked and totally distraught. He's showing a really clear pattern. The deeper the attachment, the more profound the suffering when loss inevitably happens. And then he tells the most gut-wrenching story of all. A husband finds out his wife's family is going to take her away from him, and rather than face being separated from the person he loves, he says, "We shall go together." And in this final, desperate act of attachment, he kills her and then himself. It's a brutal, brutal story, but it makes his point absolutely undeniable. Love, when it becomes a form of clinging, can lead to absolute tragedy. So the messenger goes back to the palace and tells the king all these stories. King Pasenadi is now intrigued, but he's still not totally sold. So he turns to his brilliant wife, Queen Malika, to talk through this really strange and unsettling teaching. The king explains everything he's heard, probably expecting her to be just as puzzled as he is. But her reaction is the complete opposite. She doesn't even hesitate. She just says, "Yes, of course, it is so. From what is dear, sorrow is born." You can just imagine the king's shock at how certain she is.
So, the queen starts to explain, but not with stories, with flawless, step-by-step logic. She starts by asking him about things he obviously cherishes, his most trusted general, his beloved daughter, even the people of his entire kingdom. And of course, he says yes, he loved them all.
And then she asks the crucial follow-up question. "My king," she says, "all of these things you love, they're all subject to change, to loss. If something were to happen to them, would that not cause you pain?
She's directly linking his affection to his vulnerability.
The king thinks about his kingdom, and he has to admit that, yeah, if he lost his people and his lands, his own life would be in danger. His grief would be enormous. The logic is really starting to click into place for him now.
And then, Queen Malika delivers her final, irrefutable point. She makes it intensely personal. She just looks at her husband and asks, very simply, "My king, do you love me?"
He says yes, of course, he loves her. And she follows up with the final checkmate. Well, I too am impermanent. I am subject to change and loss. If something were to happen to me, would you not be filled with sorrow? And right at that moment, the king gets it. Completely. He cannot deny it. And it's through this masterful conversation that the queen bridges that gap for the king. She takes what seems like the Buddha's harsh teaching and reveals the compassionate truth hidden inside. The king isn't transformed by a sermon. He's transformed by a logical and really loving dialogue.
And with that realization, the king, who was once a total skeptic, is utterly convinced. He declares that from this moment on, the Buddha will be his teacher. His whole journey from doubt to understanding is complete, all because someone guided him to see the nature of his own attachments.
So what is the ultimate takeaway from this whole 2,000-year-old story? Well, the teaching isn't some command to become cold and loveless. Not at all. It's an observation about reality. The potential for sorrow is directly tied to the depth of our love, because everything and everyone we love is impermanent. The point isn't to stop loving, it's to love with wisdom, understanding that change and loss are just part of the deal.
And this leaves us with a really profound question for our own lives, doesn't it? It's one thing to see the logic in this ancient text, but living it is a whole other matter. Knowing that clinging too tightly to what we love can cause us pain, the real challenge becomes this: how do we navigate our relationships and our passions with an open heart, but without the kind of attachment that leads to suffering? How do we learn to love freely and wisely?